Hello.
Say something.
Say something. Good morning. Welcome to Waters. Keep going. So this is our evergreen class, Mountain Evergreens, which is when I started looking around and was like, oh my gosh, there are a lot of evergreens. More than just a spruce tree or a juniper. Keep talking.
Yeah, you're good.
I'm not Ken. I can't keep talking. So I'm Lisa Waters Lane. Ken and I own the business. We got it from, we purchased it from my parents almost 20 years ago now, maybe a little bit longer. I kind of lost track. So actually it's more than, it's been a while. So we run it. We have our kids involved in it. So we're moving on to the third generation, which is really exciting. But today's class is Mountain Evergreens, and I'm glad you guys are here. What a beautiful morning. I can't beat it. Do we need some more chairs? I'm glad you come. All right. So Mountain Evergreens, we're in that wonderful part of Arizona where we can grow such a wide variety of things. Lower elevations, they're kind of limited on their, especially their pines and that type of thing. You go up to Flagstaff and a heck of a lot colder than you think it would be. So they're somewhat limited too. But we're kind of in that sweet spot where we can grow a lot of different varieties of plants and evergreens. And it's really nice because then you can mix it up in your yard. Your average landscape should have at least 25% of your landscape should be evergreens. And I always think of evergreens as kind of that, it's the backdrop, it's the palette that you paint on. Because everything you put up against a lot of the evergreens, the colors, the annual flowers, the perennial flowers, just show up so much nicer. Plus in the wintertime, we have beautiful winters, don't we? And we can certainly stay out on our patios and enjoy our yards from fall to early winter, and then again in the spring. So it's nice to have something green in your yard when you're out there. And not everything's gone to sleep and gone dormant. So evergreens are essential in your landscape. And as you can see, just from the few that I've pulled, you get a wide variety of evergreens. And I started pulling them, and I didn't pull everything because I just got tired. I was like, this is good enough. They don't want to sit there forever. But you can kind of see the variety within the evergreens is huge, from tall uprights to short and mounding. So I'm just going to go over some of them. I think I'll start with the tall ones, or ones you would use for screening, and then just kind of move through. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask. I don't mind stopping and answering questions along the way, especially if I forget to cover something. And then I'll cover a few product things to help you grow your evergreens as well. But I think we'll start with the tall guys. So these are screening trees. If you want to block a neighbor, block an RV, you want to block a barn, an old car, propane tank, anything, you name it. Good screening trees to use in your yard. And we'll start with the tall guy, which isn't very tall right now, but he will be. So this is Theodore Cedar. Theodore Cedars, I always call them the kind of the ugly juvenile, the gangly juvenile, because when they're young, most people look at them and go, I don't know, and I don't blame you. They look kind of funky when they're young, but you give them some maturity and they are beautiful trees. But you've got to give them room in your yards. These trees are going to get 40 feet tall, 50 feet tall. They're going to get a good 20, 25 girth to them. So this is not a tree you want to stick up right next to your house. It's a tree for further out, but it's a good, fast-growing tree for here. Actually, very drought-hardy tree for here and very resistant to bugs and disease. So it's just a super one for the yards, but it has to have space. Don't try to cram it into a small yard because you're not going to be happy and it's not going to be happy. So, and they're pretty fast growing. So even though it looks like this now, 5 years from now, it'll easily be double, maybe even triple its size. So make sure you're giving it some space. But a super tree, very drought hardy. Main reason people kill these is they overwater them, which is actually true of a lot of evergreens. This one, kind of similar. This is an Atlas cedar, another big tree. There's one of these down on the courthouse square. A lot of people don't even realize it's an Atlas cedar because they've trimmed it up so much, and you walk under it and you don't even really look up to see what's up there. But it gets to be a really good sized tree. There again, you're talking 30, 40 feet. Maybe not, it's probably close as wide as the deodar. Super little tree, not little tree, super tree for here. Again, drought hardy. So you have to be careful with both these trees. If you have a heavy clay soil, Prescott Valley, parts of Chino, even Prescott up in the Heights area. If you have a heavy clay soil, you really need to be careful when you put in any cedar. They really like good drainage. So I always tell people, if you're putting one of these guys in, dig your hole, perk test your hole. So you don't have to dig at least 2-3 feet down, pour water into that hole and see how long it takes to drain out. You want it to drain out in 6 to 8 hours. If you go back a day later and there's still water in that hole, we have a problem hole. So when you have a problem hole, you've got a choice. You can try and dig a chimney through and see if you can get more drainage in there. The other thing you can do is plant, instead of planting down into a well, plant it even or even mound up your soil so that you're planting so the water is going to slough off of it. So when you have a season like we've had with all this rain, when you have trees planted in wells, it rains, that water just sits there. And these plants that are sensitive to overwatering are just going to go, ugh, and they'll start dropping needles, they turn yellow, it's not pretty. So planting up on a little bit of a mound makes all the difference in the world for these guys. The great thing about the Atlas cedar and the deodar, if it does get overwatered, and the leaves will turn, or the needles will turn yellow, they usually drop off, but 9 times out of 10, these guys will put out new needles. Once you correct the problem, they kind of send out new needles rather quickly, and you'll never know that you had an issue with it. So really nice trees for the yard, just give them some space. Give them some space. Any questions on these? We're good?
If a tree planted a lot, how often does that have to be watered?
So the first year you plant it, you would be watering twice a week, unless you got heavy clay, which is another story. Your second year, you'd be watering once a week. And then as these guys get mature, you can go every 2 weeks, sometimes even longer, depending on your soil conditions. So as trees mature, that root gets nice and deep and wide. You're not having to water as frequently. But that first couple of years where you're trying to get them acclimated and rooted out, it's important to water. So that's those two. This guy, I just brought a little one because, wait, do you want me to put it out?
Let me get the chair for you.
Oh, there's a little thing out here. That work? Okay,
So it doesn't matter.
all right.
For the small one.
Okay, the things you'll learn. So this is the Colorado spruce, Colorado blue spruce. This guy is a young one, of course, and they can get up, we have all sizes. These trees, a regular Colorado blue is gonna get 25, 30 feet tall here, probably 15, 20 feet wide. A little bit slower growing. These guys are pretty fast growing. We're talking probably 1 foot to 2 feet a year. On a spruce, you're talking 6 to 8 inches a year. So definitely a little bit slower growing. But still a nice tree for here. This is another one, cannot have wet roots. Definitely cannot have wet roots. You'll start to see them discolor, kind of get like a lavendery weird color, yellowing towards the bottom. But in a nice, well-drained spot, these trees perform beautifully here. A lot of you go through the older neighborhoods, you'll see some big ones. I have a neighbor next to me that has a fat Albert that's pretty much full grown now. And it is gorgeous. It's a beautiful tree. And she has it right out in front of her house, kind of her driveway circles around. She has it in the center, which is a perfect spot for it because she's not trying to trim it. She's not trying to keep the size down. On these trees that want to be big, my advice to you is give them the space that they need and let them be big. These are not ones you want to cram up right against your house. Let them do what they want to do, put them in the proper spot, and you'd be really happy with your tree. But when you try to cram them into these small spaces where you have to prune a lot, it's just a lot of work you don't need. Yes?
I was wondering how that's different than mine. Yeah, it's more layered and more silver blue. Is there different varieties of the Colorado blue spruce?
So her question is it different varieties of the Colorado spruce? Yes, there is. There's Hoops, there's Thackeray, there's Fat Albert, there's the Baby Blue Eye. There's probably at least 8 different varieties of how they grow. So this guy is just the standard Colorado blue. But yeah, there's a lot of different varieties, and the difference seems to be in their color. So Hoop's Eye and Fat Albert, Baby Blue, they have a very silvery grayish blue color to them, whereas some of your just regular standard Colorados can range anywhere from blue to green. So what I always tell people is the color it is when you see it now, that's the color it's going to stay. So don't be going, well, it'll be more blue when I put it in my yard. You can help blue it up, but it's still going to kind of be the color it is. Yes. So the root growth here, which is pretty standard everywhere, most of your roots are going to be in the first 3 feet of soil. And the roots are always going to spread out just beyond where the drip line of the tree is. So if I had this in the ground, my tree was drip lines here, my roots are probably going to be out here because the roots are always going out, searching for water, searching for food, searching for nutrient. So yes, big tree, it's going to have a big root system. And that, as you water trees, as they get older, more mature, move your drip emitters out. A lot of people leave them right next to the trunk of that tree, which is great when it's a baby and you've just put it in, but 2, 3, 5 years down the road, you got to keep moving that drip system out. And you're not watering as frequently, but you're watering deeper and longer on these trees. So a lot of different varieties of spruce. There again, just kind of, and they do make some that are stay a little smaller. So the Baby Blue and the Thackeray stay a little more petite for the yard, but they're still going to get some girth to them. So kind of ask questions when you're buying a spruce as far as what the color does, height and width, because there is some variation in there. These trees, if you were they're great for the higher Prescott elevations. If you're down Cordes Lakes, places like that, I probably wouldn't go with the spruce. They like it a little bit higher, a little higher elevations is better for these guys. Okay? We'll put him over here.
What about the soil? Do they need acid soil?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you plant anything, especially with your evergreens, they do like a little more acidic. So definitely putting mulch in when you plant and all that kind of is very important. And I'll cover that when we do products in a few minutes. I'll give you some little hints on those guys to help with them.
When you plant the tree,
Mhm.
the bucket, how big should your hole be?
Yeah, so your hole should always be, I'll just kind of show you on this one. So if I were going to plant this guy, I want my hole to be 2 to 2.5 times as wide. The depth can be the same or just a little bit deeper. You don't want to plant these guys deep. Any of your evergreens, do not plant them deep. What will happen is they'll be happy for a year or two, and then all of a sudden they'll just kind of start declining. You're like, well, what's wrong with it? What happened to it? If you plant it deep, you get a lot of rot up on the trunk, and you get a lot of root rot, and they just don't like that. So always just plant even with your soil. Wherever the soil level is in the bucket, you want that even with your soil level in the ground. And it's always important to add mulch when you're planting, but I'll cover that too. So this is a Pinyon Pine. Nice little native pine for here. We have some really old, beautiful Pinyon Pines. Very slow growing, which in some spaces that's a good thing. But very slow growing, so you're not going to get exponential growth on it. So it's maybe not so much of a immediate screening type of tree because it's going to take a while before it can do any screening for you. This one also is very drought hardy because it's one of the natives for here. And by drought hardy, I don't mean never water it. It's just not going to require a lot of extra water. It also has a cousin. This is a 2-needle Pinyon Pine, so this is more like the native one for here. It has a cousin called the single needle Pinyon Pine, which is it's a very different looking tree, but very, very pretty. And I do have some, I just didn't bring one up. They're at the end of the greenhouse if you want to look at them later. Just very unique tree, not one everybody's going to have in their yard, so kind of pretty to look at and have. But the pinions, you know, some of the diseases they get here is the scale. Gets on, it's a little tiny insect that adheres itself to it. So it's just something to be aware of and watch if you have plant one or you have some in your yard. I'll show you some products to help with that as well. But cute little tree for here, just not going to be real fast growing. So don't throw it in and expect it to spring things right away.
Excuse me.
Yes.
You mentioned about not planting it deep.
Right.
What would it be just as deep as the pot that it comes in, or a little bit deeper?
For my evergreens, I like it just about the same depth as what it's in, or just a little bit deeper.
Okay.
It's more important to actually work the width of the hole more than the depth of the hole, because our roots go this way more than they go this way.
All right. And then the watering, we have a drip system, and we had a blue Albert spruce and or fat Albert spruce, and it seemed to die because from lack of water. This was last year.
Yeah.
But we have a drip system, and it was 2 gallons an hour every other day.
Right. So.
Is that enough or not enough?
Good question. So that's a whole big can of worms, and I'm happy, we'll kind of cover it now since we've been talking about these trees that want good drainage. So watering in this area is probably one of the hardest things to get correct. But once you get a hold of how to water, it saves you a lot of grief. So when we talk about drip systems, and people come in, they tell me, well, I'm running my system, an hour a day. And I say, well, what's your emitter on there? The common response is, so it's very important to know how many gallons per hour your emitters are, because that's going to tell you how long you need to run your system. Because if you've only got a gallon per hour emitter on there, and say you run it 15 minutes, that's not getting a whole lot of water, is it? So trees like a good deep watering, but it doesn't have to be real frequent. So on new trees, twice a week. So say I have this little 5-gallon tree here. If I put him in the ground, I would be watering him 5 gallons twice a week because it's a 5-gallon bucket. And that's your first season. And seasons go from March to the end of November. So that whole time, depending when you put him in, make sure you are watering him twice a week. It's not better for him to have more frequent waterings. It's better to have deeper waterings, less frequent. Then your winter watering, so December, January, February, and this is another issue, is make sure your winter watering, especially on your newer landscape items. Our winters here could sometimes be very, very dry and warm. And people think, well, it snows here. Well, yeah, it does snow, but it takes 6 inches of snow to equal an inch of water. So it takes a lot of snow on a consistent basis to water in the wintertime. And we're just not consistent like that. I mean, last winter we had one really good winter storm, and that was about it. And we didn't have a monsoon. Great one this year, but not last year. So it's with your evergreen trees, that deep watering, first year twice a week. Your second year, which would start in March, would be a once a week watering. But instead of just watering at 5 gallons, you're going to increase it to 7 to 10 gallons of water. So the older the tree gets, the less frequent you have to water it, but the deeper and the longer you're going to need to water it. Does that make sense? Right. Yeah. Sometimes these trees do better just with the hand watering because you can control it more than you can on your drip system. Because a lot of drip systems are, you got one valve and you're trying to water your lawn and your perennials and your shrubs and your trees. And they don't all want the same watering. They really, really don't. So some of your bigger trees, I really encourage people, just hand water it. Doesn't take long. And it'll save you a lot of grief down the road if you have to replace a tree.
Hey, Lisa,
Yes.
Let's pass the sign-up sheet around. And some of the stuff that she's going over, we have handouts that we'll send you if you sign up on that sheet.
Yeah.
Okay? And if you're a part of our regular email list, you still need to give us your email on that sheet because it only goes to those people in the class and the few people that are watching online.
Okay. All right. So sign up. All right. Any more? Watering, it is really, it's a bugaboo here. And like I said before, when you have clay soils, that even changes your watering a little bit more because that heavy clay just hangs on to that moisture like no other. So maybe instead of watering twice a week, maybe you can get away with once a week. And your most important, I tell people this and they laugh at me, the most important tool you have to check for watering is either a long screwdriver or a piece of rebar or a skewer, something you can go poke out in the soil with. Because a lot of times our soils on top are very deceptive. They can look dry, they can look cracked, and you're like, oh my gosh, I need water. But you go down 5-6 inches and it's a mud bath down there. So poke it around in that hole and just seeing, it's like testing a cake, where you put the toothpick in, you pull it out. Is it done yet? So if you shoved a screwdriver down in that hole and you pull it out and it's got mud and water and it's obviously wet, you don't need to water again. Go longer between your waterings. If you go and try and push it down in there and you can only get like 2 inches down, that thing needs a deeper, longer soaking. If you want it to be wet, at least 5, 6, 7 inches down. It should be showing moist, but not soppy wet.
Would you recommend a watering stick? You see these perforated, plastic pipes at Home Depot.
Yeah.
Is that effective?
Yes. So his question was the watering tubes that has the perforated holes in it. A lot of times you can put a drip emitter in there, or you can run your hose in there. I have no problem with those. I think those are great because they're actually dispersing that water further down into the root ball. So I think it's a good idea to use those if you want. There again, it's still a good idea to go test that soil and see how wet it is. You know, before you go to water again, go see how wet or dry that hole is. Because it will tell you, oh, I don't need to water yet, I can wait. Or, oh my gosh, I better get some water on this. So I like them. I think they're a good investment, especially for these bigger trees. So yeah, watering is hard, and I'll admit it. And why you should tell people things to look for, especially in evergreens. If they're overwatered, what you will see in an evergreen, especially a needled evergreen, if it's being overwatered, it'll start to yellow towards the center of the trunk and at the very bottom. So if you see that yellowing of needles towards the bottom or the center, it's probably a good guess it's being overwatered. If you see browning from the top or the very outside of the needles, or getting brown or getting crispy, then you know it needs more water. It's drying out because the water is pulling up, but it can't get everywhere it's supposed to go because there's not enough moisture in the plant. So it's going, okay, I'm going to protect what I can. So you start to see some dieback. So if you're seeing brown, crispy needles on the ends, you need to increase your water, the amount of water you're giving that. Because you always got to think, I need to get water down to the root ball and out through the root ball. Does that make sense? You good? Okay. All right. A couple more taller ones. So we're going to get into the juniper family. We are in a natural native juniper tree environment. So this is an excellent place to grow junipers. And junipers don't deserve the nasty reputation that they have. A lot of people go, oh, junipers, I'm allergic to those. I can't grow, I hate junipers. Don't like the smell of junipers. Yeah, there's a few little negatives, but they are such a great tree for here. And it's the ones that are the worst allergy-inducing are the native junipers. I have a huge one in my backyard, and in the spring, it is literally yellow with pollen. But I love the tree. I'm not going to cut it down. I'll just use more flow days or something. I don't know. But it's more the native trees that are the more pollinating, more issues. A lot of the junipers that they're coming out with now are, I can't say completely allergen-free, but they're not giving you the grief that a lot of the old ones are. So this one's a Hollywood juniper. I always kind of call this one the Dr. Seuss tree. It gets about 10 to 15 feet tall and probably 5 to 10 feet wide. It kind of has a mind of its own when it grows. It has a very, just does what it wants. It's not going to be a straight conical little Christmas tree. It's going to grow this way. It's going to grow this way. But a pretty tree to have in the yard, makes a great screening tree. All your junipers, they're again very, very drought hardy. So as they get older, you're not having to worry about constantly getting water on these guys. Very disease resistant, very fungal and bacterial resistant. So kind of a low maintenance tree to have out in the yard that performs very well. But he has a mind of his own when he grows. So if you want this nice little beautiful conical tree, don't put in a Hollywood juniper. If you like a free-form Dr. Seuss, great tree. Great tree for that. This is the Wichita blue juniper. This is actually one of the native indigenous trees to our environment. A lot of times you see the Wichita blue and the Arizona cypress kind of hanging out together naturally. Really pretty, and it has the blue tones to it. It's going to get about 12 to 15 feet tall, 3 to 5 feet wide. Another nice green tree. to have out in the yard. It doesn't take a lot of fuss, a lot of muss, and it has a cousin. So this is its cousin. This is a Spartan Juniper. Same height, same width, it's just green. So these have been sheared from the grower. That's why they're a little more pyramidal, which you can certainly do in your yard if you like that look. You're just kind of trimming them occasionally, keeping them in shape. If you just kind of let them go, they stay pretty tight, but not as tight as what they are right now. They kind of get a little freeform going to them, but not as bad as a Hollywood Juniper. I've used these in my yard. Brett, we're having a dog get together here. We've used these in our front yard because our house sits a little bit down from the road. So we have a couple of raised beds, and we have, I think, 5 of these in there, kind of staggered, just to give us a screen from the road so that we're not just, right off the road there getting a lot of traffic going by. So, and it doesn't, I think we kind of trim them once a year. Yes?
What about pruning? Do you prune any of these?
If you want to, you can.
Is there
So,
a certain time of the year to do that? I'm new here, so.
okay. You can trim any time of the year. By trim, I mean no more than 10% of it. But say you had this, and it had, here, I'll show you this one. It's kind of a better example. So this guy, I don't know if you can see how he's got this one little weird one going off right now? So if I was out in my yard, I would probably just trim him back so he's in line with the tree. But I wouldn't do anything severe to him.
So what about these guys, these ones that grow taller,
Mhm.
I guess, and bigger? Can you trim below to walk underneath them?
Yes. So her question is on trimming, and on the bigger trees, can you limb them up so that you can walk under them? You can, you certainly can. They don't need it, but if you want it, you can certainly do it.
Because I think we have big trees in our yard, I'm
Uh-huh.
not sure. They get little brown berries on them.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I've trimmed from the bottom because they like to sit under them.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine if you want to do that. If you're going to do any heavy pruning, any major limb removal, anything drastic, wait till January, February to do it. You can do small pruning and shaping right now, no more than 10% of the total structure. But if you're going to do something major, I would wait till January, February, because the main reason for that is if it's like right now the trees are actively growing, the sap is going up and down the trees. If you cut it, it's going to immediately start sapping. Once it starts sapping, that's kind of an invitation to insects. And what we don't want to do is open up our trees to insects. So it's better to wait till they're dormant and that sap isn't flowing. That way when you prune and you cut, you're not going to invite insects into your yard and your trees. Yes, ma'am.
So when you do the light trimming with the junipers, do they not branch out at the ends?
Depends on the juniper. These guys wouldn't. Some of your lower growing
Yeah,
ones
I've got a
probably
lot
would.
of them.
Yeah.
And it's starting to get,
Get a little crazy.
yeah, and so I
Yeah.
just whacked one off and went, oh boy, I hope it doesn't go like this, because then I'd have to take it down to the
Yeah. You just got, if you kind of keep prune like these guys, if you prune a little bit all the time, you don't have to do a big drastic kind of prune. So I kind of recommend just do a little bit as needed. Try not to do anything too drastic, especially on junipers. How are we on time? I need to put my watch on there.
It's 10:06.
10:06. Okay. All right, so we covered a lot of the big, taller ones. These are more of your junipers, your spruce, your deodars. I'm going to show you a few leafy evergreens, just so we all know there's more than just spruce trees out there when it comes to evergreens. And these are also still a lot of good screening plants. So this is a privet. Privets get upwards of 8 feet tall and 8 feet wide. So obviously it can make a really good screen depending upon where you needed that. It is evergreen. It's not going to be gorgeous. Look at me in the wintertime, but it's going to have leaves on it and it's going to look nice. These are really pretty in the spring when they bloom. They have that really white, very fragrant flower to them. So just kind of in there, again, no fuss, no muss kind of plant. Great for screenings, up against walls, takes full sun, real happy in full sun.
Can it go in the shade?
Could it go in the shade? It could, it probably wouldn't grow as fast. It could.
You can shake those.
Yeah, these are very trimmable. You know, you can just let them do their own thing. A lot of people like to hedge them and use them that way, and they work fine either way. This is another really good one. This is Astrocarnie. This one's very animal resistant. If you're in an area where you've got a lot of deer, a lot of bunny, this is a really good one to put in. It's about a 6x6. It blooms with a little white cluster flower in the spring, and then it puts on a really pretty red berry in the fall and winter. Great for the animals, the birds like it. Very decorative for that winter color out there. It's another one, if you just let it grow, it does a real pretty kind of vase shape to it, or you can trim them and hedge them however you want. It does get a bit of a bronzy color in the winter time, but it keeps its leaves. It just has a little more bronzy color, and then as the new leaves emerge in the spring, it's a real pretty bright green again. Another nice, very drought hardy as well, once you get going on it. If you have shade, so if you have a shadier spot, you want some evergreens in. These are the yews. This one is a Hicks yew. It's going to get up eventually. They're slow growing. It's eventually going to get up probably 12 feet or so, 10, 12 feet. I have some at my house that have been in probably close to 20 years now, and they're totally at the kind of the top of the house. So they're about 12 feet tall, 12, 14 feet tall. But they're slower growing. It's going to take them a while to get there. And yes, you can always prune, hedge them however you want. This one also puts on a red berry in the fall and the winter. The berry is poisonous, just so you're aware. So if you have children, grandchildren that eat everything, you want to just be aware of it. The berry is a little toxic. This one, this is the dense spreading yew. So this one gets about 4 to 5 feet tall, and this spreads more out. So if you have a spot where you want a nice yew, but you don't want a big tall, the dense spreading is a great one. And they make one too that's even shorter. It's like 2, 3 feet tall, and spreads out. Great for those shady areas in the yard. Mine get eastern sun and then shade the rest of the day. And they perform beautifully out there. So good for shady spots. So this is the Nandina. This is probably one of my favorite shrubs too. It's one of those people love it or hate it, I have found. I really like, this one's Gulf Stream. So Gulf Stream stays about 3 by 3. So it's not the Nandina domestica that gets 5, 6 feet tall. He just stays a nice little shrub, very well maintained. You rarely have to prune on it because it just keeps that nice little shape. It does great in pots as well in the yard. I like it because it has a variety of color through it all the time. New growth is kind of always red to orange, and as it matures, it greens out. Beautiful fall color. The reds and the oranges get really deep and beautiful in the fall. So just a perfect little evergreen, deer resistant, bunny resistant. It's a nice little shrubbery here.
It's fine in the snow.
Yeah. Oh, it takes the snow and keeps on kicking.
Does mine get a bloom?
Sorry?
Does it get a bloom?
So it doesn't get a bloom. This one does not. It's the Nandina domestica, the standard one that gets taller, does bloom and puts on a red berry. This variety, Gulfstream and Sienna, do not.
Will it survive in a container over the winter? Or do you have to
Yes. No, it will survive nicely in the container in the winter time. Very important to winter water,
Yeah.
especially in a container. Anytime you put an evergreen in a container through the winter, you're probably watering once a week, depending upon where it's at, its location. You're gonna have to water more frequently in containers in the wintertime than you would in the ground, just because it doesn't have that extra soil to help it. But it performs very well in containers. Yeah. Boxwood is another nice little evergreen, deer resistant, bunny resistant. This one is Green Mountain. So Green Mountain gets about 5 foot tall and about 4 to 5 foot, no, 3 foot wide. It has a cousin called Winter Jim that gets wider. So boxwoods are those ones. There's tall, there's short, there's wide, there's fat, there's everything in between. But just a nice little standard. Sometimes if we have a really cold winter, you'll see some winter burn on the top of these. It'll kind of turn like a little white color. Just trim it off in about February, March, fertilize, and you're gonna see a bunch of new growth and you'll forget that it wasn't even there. So it just kind of depends on our winter. If you have a cold winter or a warm winter, makes a difference on these guys. Very shapeable if you like to do topiaries, if you like to do hedges. It will also grow in a container, but does not mind being trimmed at all. So if you like to be out there and making shapes out of your evergreens, this is the one for you. So this little guy, this is in the Euonymus family. This is the golden Euonymus. The thing I like about the golden Euonymus is the color in the leaves stays year round. So even in the dead of winter, you've got color out in the yard. And especially in the darker spaces of your yard, the yellows show up so nicely. They're bright. I know some people, variegation is one of those love-hate things. Either people love variegated or they think, what's wrong with it? Is it dying? Why is it yellow? But they have you can use them in the yard very effectively to bring color into the yard without a bloom. You know, if I have, everybody asks me, I want an evergreen that blooms. Well, so do I. If I could create it, I'd be a bazillionaire. There's very few things that are evergreen and they just bloom. So it's nice to have some color out there that's evergreen, dead of winter. These again can be hedged, they can be shaped. The Euonymus family is a huge family of plants from different shapes, different colors, different variations. Almost all of them are evergreen and will do nicely here. Be careful if you have a lot of deer, a lot of bunnies, because they do like to munch on these. So if you're in one of those urban interface, wildlife interfaces, probably not the best one for you. If you're in town or you can protect it, nice little shrub. It gets about 5 by 5, maybe a little taller if it's really mature.
It does need to be pruned. The pink just went up.
You can just let them go if you want to, or you can shape them. That's what I like about them. They're very versatile.
Just slow down too much.
You probably get 6 to 8 inches a year on it. Not bad. So we talked about evergreens that bloom. This is one of the few that will do that. This is a hawthorn. This one is the Southern Moon Yetta hawthorn. In the spring, it blooms kind of real pretty pink blossoms, very, very fragrant. It also occasionally will bloom again this time of year. My neighbor has some beautiful ones in her yard. I noticed this morning they're putting on more blooms. So it could be a fall bloomer as well. Very semi-animal resistant. Deer in the spring, if they're like really hungry, I've seen them kind of nibble on these guys. They're usually pretty good and also very drought hardy. Yetta gets about 5 by 5. There's one called Ballerina that only gets about 2 foot tall, 2 foot wide. There's majestic hawthorns that get tall, 15, 20 feet. So hawthorn is another family of plants where there's a lot of variety within it. But most all of them are evergreen, take full sun, take the heat, and perform nicely here. Oh, look at Lugos. So I didn't bring in an Austrian pine because I only have some great big ones and I didn't want to move it. But the Austrian pine, the Lugo pine, Scotch pine, there's a lot of different pines. And all of them do really well in here in our elevation levels. The Lugo pine, this is a dwarf Lugo. It's going to get about 4 by 4. Nice evergreen. The pines, kind of like your Theodore Cedars and some of your other greens, really don't want to have wet feet. So you got to really make sure you're mending that hole properly and that you have good drainage anytime you put a pine in, because they're very susceptible to being overwatered. But they can take the cold, they can take the snow loads, and just really do well here. And that's pretty much all your pines. If you want to see an Austrian after the class, let me know. I can show them to you. I'm going to drag it over here. So this is fast becoming my favorite plant. This is a rainbow Ascot Euphorbia. This one looks very tropical, very delicate. This sucker goes right through the winter, stays with its leaves on it, is a beautiful little plant. It's going to get, maybe 2 by 2, 2 by 3. I have several in a pot. I have some in the ground. Last year we got that like 3 foot snow, that real heavy snow. The one snow we got, and it was buried. It was buried under that snow. And I thought, oh my goodness, I probably lost it. I'm not going to make it. We threw the snow off of it. It was kind of laying there like this. But by the end of the week, it had perked back up. It was standing back upright. It was happy as can be. So loves the sun. Give it a hot spot out in the yard. Very, very happy. The pack rats don't touch it. The squirrels don't touch it. The javelina don't touch it. The deer don't touch it. In the spring, it puts off it's not actually a bloom. It's more of a bract, but it's a real like chartreuse green. It comes up probably another 6 to 8 inches above the plant. Kind of a real pretty chartreuse, really bright color out there in the spring. And it lasts an amazing long time. I think I finally just trimmed mine back maybe 2-3 weeks ago. So it's really cool little plant that a lot of people don't know about, but really does well.
Now, are these plants available all year long, or do you have to buy them now to plant it?
Most of these, the thing with the evergreens is they're always available because we carry evergreens through the winter time, and you can plant. You can plant almost year round here. Most of these guys would be fine with that. So yes, you can find them most of the time. Things like this, I'll probably have it through fall, and then I won't have it in the winter, but I'll have it back in the spring. This is Rainbow Ascot Euphorbia. It's kind of in the same family as the gopher plant or gopher spurge. I don't know if you guys have that, but it's another good one. But try these. I grow them in pots and I've grown them in the ground. And they just kind of pop nicely into other spaces. I'm just going to show you these because it's the time of year. Mums are not evergreen, but they're fun perennial. They'll come back every year, bigger and better and more beautiful. What I like about them is that late summer, early fall color. So, when a lot of things have already done their big show and you're just kind of waiting to go dormant, these guys are just waking up and ready to roll. So, start of mum season, pansies and violas and snapdragons will be arriving soon. So it's kind of that. I love fall. Fall is my favorite time of the year. My husband hates fall. He's like, oh, that means winter is coming. I'm like, yes. So I just get excited when I start seeing mums because I know that means fall's almost here. So we were talking about planting. I was going to show you a few things. All right. When you dig your hole, you are going to want to mend that hole. You want to get mulch in that hole. So you're digging your hole twice as wide, same depth. That dirt that you pull out of there, you're going to mix with the mulch. You do a third mulch to 2/3 of your native soil. If you dig that hole out and there's just, in some spots there is, just a ton of rock, I mean, just the rocks bigger than a golf ball size, you want to get rid of those because they're not going to help you. So get rid of those guys. If you need to bring in more topsoil, you can to kind of help fill. But it's a third mulch with 2/3 of your native soil. So you're going to pull your plant out of the bucket. You're going to massage or score the roots on the sides and the bottom to loosen it up. That way the plant wants to root out and not just stay in this tight little ball. So it's very important you loosen those roots up, sides and bottoms. So you're going to loosen it up, you're going to put it in your hole, get it situated how you want it to be situated. Make sure there again, do not plant deep. Make sure you don't plant deep. And then just backfill in with your dirt. You're going to tamp it down. You want to get the air pockets out of there. You want it to know if it's going to settle more than you think. So just tamp it down lightly. You know, you don't have to get a hole or anything, but just tamp it down lightly, water it in, and water it in with your Root and Grow. So Root and Grow this is a great organic product. It helps feed the mycorrhizas in your soil. And if you have heavy, nice mycorrhizas in your soil, your roots want to move that way. So you're encouraging the roots to move out because they're searching for those mycorrhizal colonies to grow into. So it's great for transplant shock and for root growth. It's also great for, if you have a tree or a shrub in your yard that you're like, man, that thing's just struggling. This is a great product to use for that. And you're going to use it every 2 weeks. And I use it for a while, usually at least 2 or 3 months, and then I see how the plant is doing. And if it looks like it's doing fine, then I stop. But don't be afraid, it's more than just a one-time application. You want to use it several times. We want to give that tree every advantage it could possibly have to get going in our environment. And we have kind of a little bit of a tough environment. Root Grow is also a really nice houseplant fertilizer. Believe it or not, works really well. It is organic. Yeah. It's got kind of a funny color.
It smells a little.
It smells a little molasses-y kind of thing. But once you get past the color, it's a really great product to use. But the color is just, it's a brown kind of, you're like, I don't know about that. Works really well.
Does it have the instructions on there for houseplants?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, everything's on there for that.
It's a concentrated mix.
So this is our all-purpose plant food. This is an all-natural food, 744. So it's guanos, bone meals, all that kind of stuff in it, sulfur in it. Really nice fertilizer that you put on 4 times a year. So you're going to spread it out. You're going to lightly water it in or work it into the soil. It's nice that it feeds for 3 months or so. So you're not running out there having to do it all the time. You're just using it every 3 months. So it's a slow release food that breaks down. And the question always is, can I use the 2 together? Yes, you can. Definitely use the 2 together, that's fine. Also works well on lawns and perennials and shrubs. Just about anything in your yard works excellent. So this is humic. Makes things more acidic. So all our soils here are very, very alkaline, and our water is very alkaline. So we're always trying to combat that to bring our alkalinity down and make things more acidic. And humic really, really helps with that. It is not a fertilizer, but it makes your fertilizers work more effectively. Kind of changes the composition of the soil so that the trees and the shrubs can pull up and use the nutrients from the fertilizers better. Excellent for your pine trees, super on lawns. It's just a nice addition, but it's not a fertilizer. You use it with your fertilizers. Great for evergreens. I really recommend it. And this you use it basically the same way you use the all-purpose food. So I just kind of, if I'm going to use my all-purpose, I also use my humic. Use it at the same rates and the same time.
4 times a year?
3 to 4 times a year.
Oh, okay.
You betcha.
And you just work it into the soil and then water it?
Yep. Lay it on top and water it in. This is our plant protector. So this is a systemic insecticide. So a lot like I was talking about, the pinyon pines have scale occasionally. We're having a lot of bark beetle infestations in the area because of the drought. This is excellent for that. You're mixing this up and pouring it right around the base of the tree, so you're not having to do any spraying. It's just super, it moves up the tree about 1 foot a day. So once a year, so it's a great preventative. If you have a lot of those big ponderosas, if you have a lot of pinions, it's just a great preventative to use out in the yard.
All trees?
Pardon?
For all trees?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it works up through the tree, and as an insect would feed or suck or do anything to the tree, it kills them off.
Does it work on grasshoppers?
Work on what?
Grasshoppers?
No, not so much for grasshoppers. That you want to use something else. But yeah,
What's
yes,
the best time of year to use that? Because I have a lot of them on the road.
right. I think the best time of the year to use it is when they're waking up from their winter sleep. So into February, March, because that's when they're waking up. They're starting to pull all the saps and the water up to the top of the tree. So it's going to work much quicker and more effectively that time of year. You can use it any time of the year, but if you want to get the best bang for your buck, I think into February, March.
What about the fruit tree, the stages before the bloom or opens or?
So on your fruit trees, you need to read the label, because using it on a fruit tree, there's some fruit trees you cannot use it on, and you want to be aware of that.
Because of bees or?
Because it'll pass over the barrier into the fruit.
Yeah, okay.
So typically you would use this after a bloom. You wouldn't use it before it bloomed. But on your evergreens, I use it a little bit earlier. But that's the plant protector. Super product. Okay, what time is it now?
It is.
10:29.
10:29.
Whew, I am good. So, like I said, evergreens, you need them in your yard. They add a lot to the yard. There is probably twice as many as what I showed you today. That can be from little growing, ground covers to great big stately trees. So you just got to think about how you want to use them in the yard, what you want to do with them. It's super easy to care for and to use in our environment. If you guys have any questions afterwards, I'll be up here, be happy to answer questions. I want to look at your sample of the tree you brought in. But also we're available here. We're open 7 days a week right now, 8:30 to 5. And we're just moving into that beautiful time of year to be out shopping and using your garden. So thanks for coming, guys. Appreciate it. Okay.
Yeah, we'll email it out to you. Okay. It's also available on our website. You can go visit our website across the.
Oh, what's it with you?
Maps and whatever.
But yeah, I definitely think it's a green grow. It's at the point now where
I know, I don't
go
remember
either
the
way.
way.
So the
Yeah,
green grow is
exactly.
usually the last best.
This looks like the one, and this one here is.
Yeah, that's the one we have.